G'day. Welcome to this live session. I thought this morning for me, very much morning for me. If I'm a bit croaky, you're my first people I've spoken to today. I thought drawing confidence is a great subject to talk about. It's certainly one that I've had to think through and to work through myself in my own drawing life, my own drawing history. And I've got a couple of drawings that really encourage me when I think about growing drawing confidence because I've got three subjects that I deliberately didn't draw when I first came across the references because I don't know, there was just something that made me feel I couldn't draw these subjects. And each of them, when I did draw them, and I didn't draw them straight away, and I think that was a wise choice. Drawing confidence is not saying I can do it. Part of it is being realistic at what we try and do. But these were three subjects that, although I really liked the reference, the photo that I had, I somehow didn't feel confident to draw them straight away. So let me show them to you. The one that took me the longest to draw was actually a tree. And I do a lot of tree drawings, but for some reason, this tree just spooked me. It was a bit of an awkward photo. The tree was actually zoomed in from a very long way away from the other side of Sydney Harbour, virtually. Um, and I'd drawn a lot of trees, but somehow this one just felt like it was too challenging. So, and yet when I did it, it's probably the tree drawing, certainly the ink tree drawing, that I'm happiest with. And not just the tree, but also putting it in context. So, yeah, little sarcasm there, Homan. Yeah, so that's this drawing. When I look at it, it's not just that I like the drawing, and it's not just that I like the drawing because it's a tree, but I smile inside because I think, yeah, I chose the right time to draw it. And the other two drawings that are somewhat similar, one is a Victorian era terrace house, which is late 1800s terrace house in Hobart in Tasmania, that when we visited there the year before last, was one of a lot of reference photos I took. And I really love the building, and I really liked this particular view. But again, when I came back and began to draw them, I thought, "Oh, that one's just too hard. I don't think I can do a good job." And when I eventually did draw it over a year later, it turned out really nicely. And so that helped my confidence grow. And the third one that helps me, just encourages me. Um, oh, hang on, I didn't actually post this. Do I have drawings I'm not proud of and ones I don't like? Yeah, you know, I do. I can't say I've kind of grabbed them around here, Poggy or Poggies. Yeah, but the last one that I am, it's not a case of being proud of. It's a case of being pleased and encouraged by. And the last one is, again, it's a scene, and it's a photo that I took in Paris in 2015 and that I'd been looking at. But there were a lot of factors that had to come together, I thought, to make it work. And it's this one. And if you've watched many of my videos, you may have seen these all have a drawing demo, by the way. If you want to actually watch me draw each of these three and hear the voiceover that's specifically talking about the issues and how I was thinking and the techniques I was using when I drew them, then each of these is available. Right. Belgium, living in the Netherlands currently. Oh, there's so many great things to draw in Belgium. Um, yeah. So again, this was something that really encouraged me by the result. But again, I didn't rush to draw it because I didn't feel I was ready to do that. So those three drawings, and I'll show them again a bit later if you've just come on and missed it, are three drawings that have helped me at this point now grow in confidence. And I think it's this balance of trying things, but choosing the right time to try things. None of us start at the end, and learning to draw is a skill that we learn. And if we learn in a helpful way, we will develop this skill as we progress. So, what are the ways that I think we can grow our confidence? And yeah, I just don't know that I can see. I've got lots of drawings scattered everywhere because I needed to take some to somewhere where I was speaking, and but they're all ones that turned out that I liked. I'm not just sure where the ones that I'm not so happy with. Um, um, Look, there's one here I can show you. It's not it's not because it didn't turn out, um, but simply to show how my drawing style has changed and how, as my confidence has grown and my thinking has grown, I think my drawing has improved. Now, it's there's no problem with this in that it's accurate enough, and there are things I like about it. Um, I'm quite proud about the cars actually because I find cars difficult to draw. But if you like stylistically, um, there is a lot more, I think, confidence in this, a lot more preparedness to tackle the advantages or the possibilities of the scene with my mark making. This has a narrower, how can I put it? When I was looking at the photo and drawing this one, I was really focused on outlining shapes accurately and getting the perspective angles correct. Whereas here, I'm trying to perceive more of an effect and capture more of that effect by a greater sophistication of mark making. So, you know, but this has its own look, but it's a growth in confidence that's let me progress from a way of thinking and of drawing that focused on fewer things because that was as much as I could focus. And this is 4 years ago. This is actually a YouTube. Actually, no, this may actually be an Instagram live demo. So it might be 5 years ago even. But that's where I was starting. And so confidence as it grows opens up more possibilities as well. Um, I think a more useful thing as a learning experience, being proud of. It's not being proud or not proud, but it is a learning experience. But we certainly can be pleased, and we certainly can be displeased with with our drawings. And when we're talking about being encouraged or discouraged by our drawings, well, we are emotional beings. We do have feelings, and we do respond to things. And one of the things we respond to is hopes that we've had that we have or haven't met. And so I think it is helpful to be aware of this kind of emotional roller coaster that learning to draw or even just doing any drawing may produce. So let's look at ways we can maximize our possibility to feel encouraged when we draw, to actually grow confidence. Because what we want to do is to establish a pattern of drawing, a habit of drawing that ends up encouraging us, ends up making us want to do more. Um, so let's have a look. And firstly, it's going to be a lifelong thing. It's going to last as long as our drawing experience is lasting because it is a developing thing and it changes what and how we draw, as I just showed you then with those drawings. And it will be individual because we face different issues. So the ways that I can grow my drawing confidence may not be exactly the same as the way you might improve in your drawing confidence at this point, because often it's to do with overcoming different challenges. And at different points, we have different challenges. I mean, sorry, there's something on my glasses. We all like to feel that we're improving, that we're getting better from the effort that we're doing, and that we're realizing what's in our mind more. And so overcoming issues is important, and we have different issues. So that will make the journey a bit different for each of us. Um, okay, I think one of the really helpful things to do is to try and disconnect in the moment our drawing experience, though, from our feelings, because confidence is a feeling, and our feelings can get in the way of sensible decisions and realistic choices. So, what I mean is, um, firstly, realize that, or I mean, the thing I talked about in yesterday's video, that when we learn to draw, we're learning a skill. So we're learning, and so to take on board all the things that are to do with learning anything, and not to get caught up in kind of talent and being an artist and you know all of those things. But to think, well, I'm learning something. So how do I learn things? And how do I set up, if you like, a course of study to learn to draw as opposed to learn to use a computer or the way it was set up at school for me to learn maths, whatever. So that's, I think, an important thing. Um, and then to where have yeah, and another important way we disconnect from our feelings is to have set times to do things. When I went to school, I didn't get a choice. I certainly didn't get a choice about whether I went on a certain day or not. If it was a school day, then I was up at 7, I was leaving home at 10 past 8, and I was at school at 20 to 9. And that's just what happened. The day and the date told me that I was going to be sitting in maths. That was my least favorite subject. Um, and and that was very helpful because I ended up learning a lot more maths than I expected to. Not because I wanted to, but because when it was time for maths, I was there doing maths. And I think that's a helpful thing with learning any skill, and includes learning to draw. I set a time, I lay it aside, I'm ready for that. When the time comes, I do whatever I need to do for that. And and so how I feel isn't the thing that decides if I do it and how I do it. And I think that's helpful because it helps to put how I feel in the right place. I know that many drawings I've done wouldn't have happened, and there wouldn't have been any videos for them if I hadn't just said, look, I'm just going to start. Because in the moment, for whatever reason, I wasn't feeling like drawing. I wasn't feeling that it was somehow going to work out for me. G'day, Amy. Usually find myself frustrated before I finish a drawing, but after I come back in a day or so, I look back, I'm amazed how good it is. While not perfect, it shows improvement. Yes, that's great. And again, there's a disconnection there from the feelings of the moment. And we can get very caught up in the moment when we draw as well, because we're focused on what we're trying to do at that particular time. And it may be as simple as I want this line to be at 44 degrees. And when I draw it, it's at 46 degrees. And I go, ah. Whereas by the end of the drawing, you can't even see that. And of course, if I never finish my drawings, then I'll never realize that. Which is what one of the reasons why finishing our drawing is so important. The things that we thought were so critical when we were doing it, the focus we had, the things we were saying to ourselves, often have no life, don't matter at all the next day. But if we can disconnect our feelings from our drawing process in terms of starting and finishing our drawings, once I start, I'm going to finish. It's Tuesday night, 7:30 p.m. I draw till 9 every week. So if that's the time, that's what I'm doing. That's a good way of helping to establish the balance between how we feel and what we do. Um, which is probably a helpful thing in life in general, to find that balance between what we do and how we feel. Um, Let me see. Probably then the next most important thing I'd say is to have realistic expectations. I and it can go two ways. We can think I'm never going to be very good at all. And so we actually lack so much confidence that we don't give ourselves the credit that we really should. So that's one thing we need to overcome, to have a sense of, look, this is a skill I can learn, I can improve. I might never be Leonardo da Vinci, but I can learn and I can improve. And the fact that we've all been to school and we've all learnt to read and write and add numbers to some degree, more than first aid kindergarten, shows that we can learn. And particularly now, the advantage of learning something we don't have to learn, that we want to learn. So we can learn. But the other problem, and in some ways I think this may be a bigger growing problem, is it's that if I think it's going to be easy, if I'm overly confident as well, that can then set me up to lose my confidence. If I don't realize the task I'm doing, if I'm thinking, oh, how hard can it be? I've watched wonderful drawings appear in 30 seconds on social media for years. And I'm thinking, it looks so easy. It can't be that hard. I'm going to give it a go. And we've imagined all this success before we've even picked up a pen, and so we've not set ourselves up properly. Then we can suddenly crash in confidence, and it's not that we can't get there, but we didn't anticipate what the journey was going to be like. We didn't anticipate it was actually a learning experience, not just somehow releasing our creativity to do its thing. So having realistic expectations, either that it's going to be hard or it's not going to be as easy as I think, is very important. Um, and we can't always know those exactly before we start. We may not be able to know them at all, but we can be ready for the fact that it could be harder, or maybe in some parts of the journey, it can actually be easier. But still, to take on board the whole thing that I'm learning a skill, and therefore it's going to look like and feel like at times the way learning any skill is. Um, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences with confidence in your drawing journey on the chat. And I think perhaps another really important thing is to have the proper attitude to, let's call them mistakes, marks that aren't in the right place. This can be incredibly stressful depending on what part of the process where they happen. Now, if I draw in pencil, then obviously anything that's not in the right place, unless I've drawn it really heavily or it's a really hard pencil or something, I can erase. So that takes some pressure off, but it also puts some pressure on, because anything not in the right place, I can erase. And that in itself can become a burden. And I can end up, as I did, erasing more than I was leaving on the paper. And I really felt like my drawings spent more time in reverse gear than forwards gear. And that had a really negative effect on me, because every time I'm erasing and can't get it right, I found I was saying unhelpful things to myself. Um, so that and so what I did was I said, well, let's do without the eraser, and let's just draw directly with a pen, which I was wanting to do, but I guess the fear of mistakes was a bit overwhelming. I was doing for my big Instagram drawings. If you've seen them, these aren't freehand; these are drawn with the help of a grid, but they have pencil under drawings, and then I use those as a guide for the pen over the top. I've got hundreds of those on my Instagram channel if you're interested. But um, yes, the pencil ended up for me becoming really an unhelpful thing, because the better I became at drawing, in some ways, the more I improved my basic skills, the more I was erasing, I found, because I could see more things, that more possibilities that these lines weren't quite right for. all the time. And I think what I learned was that for me at least, using a pen, every mark in the end, every mark I put on the paper has to be incorporated into the final drawing. And the drawing wasn't perfectly outlining the shapes really accurately, but it was combining a whole lot of marks to create the effect at the end that I wanted to present the scene and to capture the things in the reference or in my imagination that made me want to draw it in the first place. So I found I found that very helpful with my self-confidence to actually, what would you call it? You know, take off the floaties. Just to say, okay, I'm going to embrace the process and I'm going to expect that there'll be things not quite right. And look, it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes when I'm doing a drawing video, one of my initial marks will be, you know, should be like that, and it's like that, or it's like that, and I think, no, I'm going to start again because it's a fundamental kind of part of the whole scene. It's a really important reference point for a lot of things that are going to be drawn around it. So it's going to throw everything off if it's off. And I'll start again. But I'm usually only 2 or 3 minutes into the drawing at most at that stage. So that can be helpful as well. But generally, though, I reach a certain point where I think, okay, this is working well. And whatever happens, I'm going to keep pushing on with the drawing. And even if there are things that I think, yeah, I think that's going to kind of ruin it at the end, particularly if I've added too many marks too quickly because I can't take them off, the only way I can somehow undo that to a degree is to put more marks on some parts so that the relative difference between the two changes, that what looked a bit too dark doesn't look as dark, but only because I've made other parts darker still. But my point is that when we can't just erase everything we've done, we learn ways to create further effects, whether it's to put effects in or to try and pull back the effect of something we've already done. And so, in fact, what we've done from not getting it right in the first place is to set ourselves up to learn more and to improve our skills. And so, not perhaps in a particular drawing, but in a drawing process, drawing journey, we've actually developed our skills further. We've developed our abilities to see a problem and to work through it in the course of a drawing. And often that opens up possibilities for to be able to do things that we couldn't do before. When I started this video, I showed a few drawings that I had the references for a long time and hadn't drawn because just something about those scenes intimidated me. And this was the other one that I showed. Something about these scenes intimidated me, and but at some point I reached the point where I felt like I had the confidence, and it was because I think I developed ways of looking and working through the problems that drawing directly freehand in ink presented over time, and through working out how to overcome things that weren't working perhaps quite as well for me as I would have liked, I got to the point where I realized I'd built up the skill set, the way of thinking, because everything comes from how we think and how we understand what we're doing. That from the way I was thinking and understanding my drawing process, that I actually had the ink on paper techniques to make something of that scene so that in my drawing I could present on paper what I liked in the photo. Um, yeah, and that grows confidence. So when we have the right attitude to mistakes, that's really important. I like to, particularly when we're learning to draw, which is really what we're all doing all the time, but particularly when we're learning to draw and we're very conscious that we're learning to draw, very helpful to think of mistakes as our friend, not as our enemy, because a mistake and certainly the same mistakes we make over and over again, they give us direction to where we need to put more time. If all of my lines are wonky, my straight lines are wobbly across the page, then I know I need to spend time working on my straight lines. The problem's not that I have lines that aren't straight that I want to be straight. The problem is that I haven't put enough effort into working on that particular skill. And drawing straight lines freehand is one of the skills we can very profitably work on without having to do a drawing. We can work on that in isolation. Um, New switch to only pen for that reason. Yeah, fantastic. And and are you glad? Have you grown in confidence? Has it helped you overcome that creepy imperfectionism? Um, Quiz? Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, look, a healthy attitude to mistakes is so important. Um, and when I've got something wrong, well, this is now an opportunity to learn how to get it right. And I think one of the problems we have when we learn to draw that we don't get when we say learn an instrument is that our drawing's there at the end. And so if something's not right, we see it. And particularly if something's not right, but everything else it turned out really well. And so part of us is going, really wish I hadn't kind of wrecked it. But we need to appreciate, keep the context. I'm learning to draw, I'm learning a skill, and learning to bring all the parts together is a skill. And I'm learning that still. If I were learning the piano and I played a piece and 3 notes were wrong, well, no one sees that piano practice at the end, including me. And so I can be happy at the parts that I got right and be thinking that with the notes I got wrong, oh, well, I'll just maybe work on that a bit. But with my drawing at the end of the practice learning session, it's there. And I think that puts a pressure on us that we want the drawing to look right, to look perfect. When, look, in all honesty, if we're learning to draw, some drawings will look pretty good that we do, but others will show signs of the fact that I'm still learning to do something. And when I see the weakness, I need to embrace it and get direction from it to use the very important things that it's telling me. Um, so, they're not spoiling our artwork. We're not producing artworks. We're learning to draw, and artworks will come. And some of our drawing exercises might look a lot like artworks, and hooray! But if I because if I'm afraid of the problem with the whole mistake and artwork thing is it sets our mind thinking differently. See, we're wanting to grow confidence, but fear of making a mistake actually robs us of confidence. If I'm afraid of making a mistake, I'll become very cramped and inward and wanting to be very cautious in the marks and the lines that I make, lest I make a mistake. And so I'm actually going to be reducing what I'm doing rather than learning to develop and do more. I'm going to not take risks when we can't learn to draw without taking risks. We have to learn the confidence of moving our arm briskly and freely and across large areas as well as small areas and doing things spontaneously to get the life, the energy, the movement of that into our marks to create the effect that we want. Um, and and Sorry, I just got distracted by reading the thing. Yeah, we want to capture the energy as well. And you don't get that when we're going careful and slowly, and because it's not just where the nib tip goes on the paper, but it's the way it goes on the paper. It is that movement, the speed, the variation in speed from the start to the end all creates different effects. And when these are all combined at the end, they overall create a very different feel to our drawing. So these are the things we can't learn if we're very focused on making mistakes. So, and again, if we think we're producing an artwork, then making a mistake becomes this terrible thing. Whereas if I'm learning, hey, I'm learning, I'm experimenting, I'm trying things out, I'm taking risks. And if I work when and if when I'm learning right from the start, I'm prepared to take risks, then that in itself will build confidence because I won't be becoming precious about how it looks at the end because I'm not producing artworks, I'm learning to draw. However, just to balance that, because so many of these things are balanced things, and for different people, our pendulum swings a different way or it's at a different point right now. So I need to hear the other side. It can be very helpful for our self-confidence when we draw to not push ourselves too far, to not go beyond what we have a chance to do well. A teacher who gives their students maths problems that are just too hard for them to do, they haven't done the groundwork to be able to solve them. Well, that's not helpful. That's not going to help them learn. That's just going to tick them off and make them not want to bother. Um, Sometimes, though, when we're learning to draw, particularly when we don't have a classroom drawing teacher, it's easy for us to, without realizing it, get carried away with a scene, with how interesting or complex or whatever it is, and try and draw things that we actually have no chance of drawing, not of drawing well. And there are two problems from that. One is that we can see that what we've done is just totally out of the park and we get discouraged. The other is that we don't know enough to know that what we've done isn't very good, has a lot of problems. And we actually start to embed bad practices, bad experiences into our thinking and our practice. And that's a problem as well. Because an important thing to realize is that practice doesn't make perfect. Practice can simply mean I make a lot of mistakes over and over and over and over again, and I lose the ability to see those mistakes because I get so used to seeing, well, that's how this looks in my drawing. So, yeah, um, it's not practice that makes perfect, but it's intentional, focused practice where we're looking at what we're doing and we're always critiquing and reviewing, and we're not afraid to find problems. And again, if I lack self-confidence, I can actually be afraid to do that critiquing. I kind of want to just move on somehow quickly. But it's the things that haven't worked that direct me where I need to go next or what I need to do next. You know, if I do a drawing that doesn't turn out, my first suggestion would be like as a teacher with a drawing student, if someone brought us drawing to a class that I'd given them a reference the previous lesson, and it had a lot of issues. If I felt that I'd still made the right choice, that in fact it's within their ability and their experience, I'd probably say I'd go through it all. I'd explain all the things that perhaps there were issues with it, but I'd then suggest you do it again because now you know. Now it's clearer what the issues were, and you start where you finished off last time, which is starting further ahead than you started last time. And so this can be a way to grow confidence because then after I've redrawn it and I do it the same size and I spend the same time, like I keep the same parameters the second time as the first time, use the same materials, unless there was a significant problem with the materials, do all that. And now when I finish, I can compare the two. So now I have if you like, I have an extended means of learning now from this one reference to draw because I've got my two efforts to compare. And that lets me see the difference between what I did the first time and what I did the second time. and how that works, how that affects what I see. And what I would then do as the teacher is I would set the next assignment, the next drawing to do something that's very similar but different. So if perspective issues were the thing in that first one and was the thing that caused the problems, then I would now do a similar perspective demanding drawing. Maybe though I'd have a scene where I flipped the perspective angle. So instead of sloping down one way, they all slope down the other way because we all have our easier way of doing it. Easier direction of angles according to if we're left or right-handed. So I might do something like that. I might change the decorative elements of the building. It might be more or less complicated. There might be brick textures to have to worry about. So I'd change something, but I'd have a lot of overlap because that is another way of extending our skills. And when we do this well, as in the learning process, it builds confidence because it sets us up to improve. It sets us up to not make the same mistakes over and over again. And if I'm learning to draw and I'm doing it myself, I'm finding YouTube videos to watch, really, really important to understand. That makes me my teacher as well as my student. My teacher is not the person talking in the video. This whole video is a resource that I, as the teacher, have chosen to use. So I need to make sure it's a good resource for the class, for me, okay? Because I'm putting together a curriculum by finding these resources. So I want to make sure that they're going to all come together and they're going to produce a good drawing course since I'm the one taking it. And then as the teacher, I have to mark my own work at the end as well. It's important to understand this as well and that we embrace that role because if we really are our teacher, if we're doing all the things that a teacher does, works out what we're going to do this lesson, what we're trying to achieve this year, works out the subjects that we're going to be drawing, the materials we're going to use, how much time we're going to spend on things, then I need to be doing those things and I need to put time into thinking about those. So unless I have a pre-packaged course where really once I've chosen the course and maybe I've paid for it, then the presenter of the course does become the lesson. But if it's not that, then even though I'm the one doing the lessons, I'm actually the teacher as well. And marking the work to see not just have I learnt it, but when we mark the work, the teacher gets to learn whether they taught it well. And as an ex classroom teacher, yeah, when the marks come back, we don't just see how the students have gone, but we see how the teacher has gone as well. So it's a balance we need to keep in our mind. And if we're a good teacher, we will be growing confidence in our students because a good teacher will be making the sorts of choices in the lessons that that means that it's as easy as possible for the student to improve, which will grow confidence. So need to be a good teacher as well. Okay. What else have I got here? Oh yeah. A good way of building confidence when we draw is to take less risk at any given point. And by taking less risks, I don't mean not doing all the skills that we need to do, but by less risks, I mean do smaller drawings, less commitment. A drawing that's going to be finished in 20 minutes because it's small. And I mean, I tend to do small drawings now because even when the drawings are quite complex, they're quite small because I'm making a video and I don't want to have to, if it's a 45-minute real-time drawing, no one's going to watch it for that long. And if I speed it up too much, then it's just nonsense. You may as well put chipmunk music onto it. It's too fast to really, so, but a smaller drawing can be physically smaller drawing can be done in less time. And that means that I learn things in a shorter period, because I've often talked of the learning cycle. The learning cycle is basically a lesson where something is taught and practiced and put into practice and then marked. And so, yeah, so I find the reference, I sit down, I draw it, I look at my reference, I look at my drawing, I consider what I was hoping to achieve, because I'm also the teacher, and I'm marking and I'm asking, have I achieved it? If I have, tick. If I haven't, why? How haven't I? Is it a case of um, are there inaccuracies, or have I simply not developed things as well as I might have developed them? Or did I use the wrong materials? Did I use a pen that was too light or too heavy? So there's the cathedral's at the end of the street. It's in glaring sunshine and really washed out. So how do I create that effect, having drawn the street? Well, I use a lighter pen. Was the pen too light? I used a 0.05. I used a 0.1 for the buildings at the very end of the street. But should I have used the 0.1, but just with as little, like drawing it as light, using it as lightly as I could, like as little pressure as I could? Should I have used more pressure with the 0.05 to get a slightly darker, but not very much darker feel? Or is it okay the way it is? These are the things we think about when we finish and when we look at it. Would this have worked better if I'd put more darkness here on the shaded, if I'd done more hatching there on the shaded side? This shadow is darker. Would that have worked better? But then shadow is darker than shade. That's physics. So that's another thing to consider. Or should I perhaps have let it be a bit darker down here? Is this value down here, the lights and darks overall, not quite dark enough to anchor the scene? These are all the things that a teacher would be asking if they were marking this drawing in relation with the reference photo. And of course, one of the things I can do is I could put tape back around this. And people often ask me what tape I use. I use cheap, low adhesive masking tape that I buy at our chain hardware store, the Australian equivalent of Home Depot, I think it would be, Bunnings, we call it. Yeah, it's just a few dollars, $3 or $4, I think, probably $5 or $6 a roll. Anyway, for art supplies, it's cheap. It's nothing special. And that keeps all my my edges neat when I'm drawing. But I could put that back on, and I could work at darkening these values down here, or maybe just on this side, and see how it looks. Because you see, I'm not producing an artwork. I'm learning to draw. And so I'm not worried about wrecking it, because this is a vehicle to learn to draw better. And so it's that's what it is. And so I may as well get the full value I can out of it. And this is how we build confidence. We stop worrying about wrecking things, and we start learning to explore and take it full advantage of the fact that I'm in my learning to draw phase, not my artist phase. Do I have any tips on coloring ink with alcohol markers? Well, I've got let me see, where is it here? Honestly, my stuff is in such a mess here. Here is a small number of the markers I have, but you'll notice they're not very colorful. They're all they're all black and white, and shades of black and white. And it goes back to I did actually learn to, if you look at this, I did a lot of interior scenes where the lighting effects were very important parts of it. So I did learn a lot to. Oh, actually, um, I think where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I thought it was just in one of these. Um, but it's not. Let me just look in case it's in one of these. Oh, here it is. Here it is. This is, I think, a nice little scene I did. I was wanting to, it was, yeah, using the markers. But yes, how we create light effects. So, uh, Conrad, that's my focus with the markers. It's light effects and combining that with. So this was a nighttime. Oh no, actually it wasn't nighttime. It was in a castle in Scotland, but it was a dark castle, dark inside, a little corner of a bedroom with a lamp. And I just thought, yeah, and if you actually look at the fabric too, it's a nice little example of drawing the effective detail of those sprays of roses seen at this perspective on the cushion and on the other parts, but not drawing all the detail. But yeah, we draw light by drawing the darkness. The paper is the light. And if we want to have really extreme bright parts, then we get that by leaving the paper white, but it will only look extremely bright if we then darken the areas that are in shade and shadow. So, but with colored markers, as opposed to black and white shades of gray markers, of course, you're also working with color. So but I did paint for 10 years before I drew. And the one thing to bear in mind is that with colors and distance, that as an object moves further away from us, the colors become less bright. So I'll just put this back in so I don't razz them. There's one on the back too there. And so having enough dull colors, I think is a problem. It's easy to buy lots of bright ones, but that tends to make everything feel like it's on the same plane, if you know what I mean. Is there something here with color that yeah, nothing small enough to there's a painting on the wall in another room, but let me just run and get this painting. I'll be 30 seconds. Less even. Sorry, I'm live. Oh, goodness. My wife's in another room having a video chat with a family member in the UK at the moment. So we're all going around the world at the moment. Yeah, look, this isn't actually very colourful because it's white, but you'll notice that trying to get a sense of distance, of close and further, the part of the way we get the further feel is that these colors are muted. I mean, you look at the grays here and the greens, because bright colors come forward, and so this gum blossom is white. So yeah, but the brightest white parts are in the closest parts, and when we go further back, the white parts aren't as white as they are in the parts that I'm bringing further forward. Now, they are like, you know, at this distance, they're looking like cotton wool balls. And that's how this gum blossom, particular gum blossom, looks. But with the leaves as well, um, the there's a little. It's a very dark sort of. The greens are a little greener close up, but it's not a bright green to begin with. But and also the edges are sharper for things closer. So we have the sort of fuzzy edges for the trees in the background. Um, and we have sharper edges on the detail that's closer. So manipulating edges and that one, I kept that one. That one didn't get sold because my wife really liked it and asked, could we keep it? So we did. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, but manipulating the brightness of the color and also replicating the fact that yellow doesn't travel as far, which with green is really important because as the yellow spectrum disappears before or lessens before it reaches us, the green becomes more blue because blue and yellow make green. So that's why mountains look blue in the background, even though they're covered with green trees, because the green has all disappeared. Um, okay. Oh, goodness. The man next door started using a blower somewhere to get rid of, I don't know, leaves, I guess. I just learnt to love leaves. That's how I solved that problem. And look, yeah, I think another couple of things just for confidence is it can be helpful to look back over 6 months or 12 months if we've been drawing for a while and see where we've come. And besides just giving us encouragement, that can also give us focus as well. It can help us see strengths that we might have started developing without realizing it. We might have realized that we've begun to change the way we draw trees in a way that works better, and that can then let us focus on that in the future. So to actually intensify our improvement there. Or we might look back at some of our earlier drawings that we've improved our ability to think of what we're doing and create better effects. But it may actually help us focus on what we're doing better more and therefore focus on it more. So there are lots of advantages in looking back and considering things that we did compared to things that we're doing now. Or maybe we've got into some bad habits. Maybe we're rushing things more. And if we're honest, when we look back, actually, my best drawings were all 12 months ago. Well, that says that I've introduced something into my drawing practice and thinking that's perhaps not helpful. Yeah. So, but the thing is, everything in our life we can change, we can impact, we can affect, whether it's what we do or how we feel. And so confidence is so important when we draw. We have to take a risk, and we don't learn to take those risks and to then develop the skills so that the possibilities are what we think of rather than the risks, because we can confidently and more predictably take those risks and control what we're doing and have predictable outcomes. But that only happens by taking the risk. We can't learn to speak another language if we just don't at some point surrender ourselves to the sounds, to the rhythms of the language, to that intuitive speaking without thinking that a native speaker of any language has. If we want to be fluent, we can't sit there and analyze everything as if our brains are grammar book all the time. We have to just respond in that intuitive sense that native speakers of a language do. And that's a risk. And we will fall over lots of times as we start to do that. the way a toddler falls over, but a toddler always gets up and just keeps going. And that's what we need to do with our drawing. We need to learn to take the risks, to take them at the time where we have a chance to do them well. We wouldn't stand a baby up and expect them to walk and then they fall over and we put them up. They're just going to get discouraged and unhappy. Has to be the right moment, the right place of development, but it's the same in our drawing. We need to push ourselves forward, but we also need to, I apologize for the leaf blower. It seems like he's coming down the hall. Actually, that's how it feels here. I don't know how much you can hear it there, but it's taking risks at the right time where we have a chance of doing well. And again, this is where we become our teacher. A good teacher doesn't push students past where they're ready to be successful. And so that's important too. That whole, I'm the teacher, I'm the student. And a good teacher is encouraging when something hasn't worked. And just as a good teacher is encouraging when something has worked. And so again, I need to be speaking the encouraging things that a good teacher would say to me if I had an actual teacher in the room. So it's very scary to try to draw something because if we don't try, we never know we need to. Yep. That's right. We need to try, we need to embrace, and we need to be kind to ourselves as well. Myself feeling not proud of what I draw. What really is going on? What's really going on is the guy next door is using a blower to, I think, clear his pathway of leaves. That's if that's what you're asking about, Doug. That's what's going on. And the room of the house I'm on has like meter to the fence, and then he's on the other side. Embracing the mistakes was really. How often do I go live? Look, I've gone months and months and months and months where I didn't go live. I've just started going live again. I would like to have a set, maybe 1 or 2 set times a week where I go live for say an hour. But unfortunately, that's not. Things come up. I feel like I'd like to have a Sunday night here, because that would be Sunday morning in much of the world, which is probably a good time, and then maybe a morning here. But Sunday night is a bit unpredictable in terms of what's happening. So look, in fairness, he said to me, because he knows I do these, and he said to me, oh, Stephen, let me know if it's a problem, because I can do it another time. But so if I was recording, sometimes I'm recording a live to camera in the bottom backyard, and I'll just ask him, can he give me 10 minutes to finish? And he's really chilled to do that. That's not a problem. But he doesn't know I'm doing this. It's what is 9 a.m. exactly here in Sydney, Australia at the moment. So I feel like I'm the only person in the world, though, who still sweeps and rakes with things that you hold and move in your hands. Yes. Tuesday evening, West Coast time. No. The storm blew all the new leaves in. We've had a few stormy days. Yes. Today's a nice cool day. It's going to be a maximum of what's the weather saying? It was it maximum of 20 degrees today, which will be lovely, because it was, I don't know, 36 degrees yesterday. So we're in that spring crazy kind of the odd summer day and the odd sort of late winter day, and occasionally some spring days. But we're sort of sitting in the middle of the 20s for the rest of the week after that. So that will be nice. All right. Yeah. So look, confidence. self-confidence, really important when we draw. It's uh, and if we don't think we have a problem, that's great. We probably don't, because we'd know if we do. But if we feel that there's this tension with this love-hate thing happening with our drawing, then it's probably a good indication that maybe we need to give a little bit of time, not just to learning to draw, but developing a good attitude to the process and learning to be easy on ourselves, but not just that, because we also want to be hard on ourselves at times to push ourselves to get to the place that we want to go. So, working out that balance, that tension, so that for me, my drawing journey does overall become a thing of joy. Look, some frustration is actually a really good indicator of our learning process, because it means we're working hard. It means we're seeing things, we're analyzing what we're doing, and we're thinking of what we might do, and all of that. So that can be great. But in the end, is that frustration pushing us on to greater success for what we're trying to do, or is it discouraging? If it's discouraging, we need to change the direction that it's working. And yeah, sometimes pulling back a bit, sometimes we lose confidence because we've gone too far too quickly, and there's not been anyone skilled enough to recognize it and to tell us that that's what we've done. That's the problem, and we need to come back to where we can get more runs on the board, so to speak, more easily. Trite, how much do you think Lord of the Rings type drawings help beginners like me, or any type of rural drawing? In fact, hello from the UK. Hello, my wife's talking to the UK right now. Um, uh, Look, it depends what you want to draw and why you want to draw it. And I mean, I've got a vague sense of what you mean by Lord of the Rings. I mean, are you wanting to learn to draw backgrounds, which I think is the word? Um, but really, the main thing in the drawing is going to be figures doing exciting things, um, because the way we draw backgrounds as background scenery is different to if the background scenery is in effect the main event. If the scene is the subject, that's very different to the scene is the backdrop in a play, and the characters are the main characters. There are figures that are the main characters. So it sort of depends on what you're wanting to do, because if it's a backdrop, then you don't want it to overwhelm the figures that are creating the main impact, that are telling the story most strongly. So it really depends. But equally, the best way to learn to draw, I think, is in the context of drawing things you love, things that you find interesting, and the things that you want to be drawing, and in the style that you want to draw. If you want to learn to draw in ink without using pencil, then don't start drawing with pencil, because pencil is a great drawing tool, great drawing medium, and I started drawing with pencil. But while there is some overlap, they are fundamentally different materials. It's like drawing with watercolor, it's like painting with watercolor or with oils. They're very different things that have very different challenges. And that, I think, is and so things don't flow from one to the other. So learn the one you want to learn. If you want to learn to draw with pencil, then do that. If you want to be able to draw freehand with ink without having any pencil on the paper, then start doing that, because that way, from the start, you'll be developing the skills you need, and you won't be having to unlearn skills that you've learned that were suitable for drawing in pencil but don't work when you draw directly in ink. So start the way you want to finish. And I would say that most of the time includes with the sort of subject. So if you want to draw a lot of architecture, if you want to learn perspective, you know, then start by drawing buildings if you want to draw street scenes and buildings as the main thing. And then you'll learn to draw figures so they work in with that scale and subject. But if you want to draw figures doing exciting things, then start with drawing figures and focus on anatomy right from the start, and focus on perspective, not with buildings, but perspective applied to anatomy. Learn perspective in relation to anatomy. Um, so yeah, few random thoughts there. Um, you're right, it's mainly seen trying to capture talking in. Yeah, 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 yep, yep, yeah. So yeah, look, do it. But I suggest what you do is you practice the landscapes without um, something I'm often told is that people use my channel for their to develop their background skills because they realize that they're focused on drawing the figures and on all the what I've just said, the anatomy and perspective for anatomy and so forth. And then they realize that when they go to draw the scenes, that the backgrounds are weaker, and so they're trying to kind of improve their backgrounds so that they don't become an obvious weak spot in the drawing. Um, so if that's you tried, if you're now out of balance with your development of figures versus backgrounds, then the fastest way to improve the backgrounds is to just draw backgrounds for a bit, and but bearing in mind that you're going to draw them differently to how you would draw them if they were the main event. And like maybe you could have some figures cut out that this is just for something I did a few years ago, but you could have some figures that you have ready and that you just place, or you may do it digitally, I don't know, but have some figures that you place on the background to just see how it now looks with some figures on it. But you don't spend time drawing the figures all the time. You work on the skill that you're wanting to develop. Yeah. I'm hopeless. I'm taking advice on perspective only, buildings and landscape only. Yeah, perspective will affect figures very much. Well, it particularly does. I mean, perspective is simply how things look according to the angle with which we look at it from. With a building, the whole building is in the same perspective, but with a figure, because we've got joints and we move directions. So, this arm looks very different if it's like this to if it's like this, because when the perspective changes, when the position I view it from changes, I haven't moved my eyes, but the object has moved. When that happens, I see it very differently. And gosh, what scrawny arms I've got, all the better for drawing. Yeah, when the position changes, how it looks changes. So the arm, this forearm, is very different here to if I view it from here. So learning to understand how the limbs and the joints and everything changes when the viewing position changes. And I mean, Armin's been talking in the chat about skulls and how, when the head position changes, how what we see changes. In the same way it happens in buildings, but it's more obvious with a face, with a head, because we learn to look at heads very intensely as babies, as children. Nothing is more important than our mother's face, and so we learn to see features and to read them, to understand them, and to work out what's happening in the world and positioning from how the features look more than anything else. And so when we draw, that's challenging because we know how heads look when they're right. And so we want to capture that. Please hit that like button for me if you haven't already. And I think we'll maybe bring it to a close here. It's 9:10, so it's ready for my morning cup of coffee. Unless anyone is has a question you want to ask me, I'll just hover for another minute. In my opinion, beginners should start with the basics. Yep, yep. I agree. We don't speed up our learning if we start too far along. We really need to start. And the other thing is that we don't all start at the same place either. So one person may move through the basics very quickly because they've actually, just by doing other stuff in their life without realizing, they've picked up a lot of prior knowledge. That's very helpful in drawing, that maybe someone else who hasn't done those same things hasn't picked up, and therefore it will take them longer to progress through these same basics. But we need to progress through them, whether we end up being able to do it quickly or whether we need to kind of give some time and commitment to it. We still need to do it. Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, look, thanks everyone. And I'm trying to make these regular. At this point, though, unless I can manage to get some set times that I can tell you, if you hit notifications, that's probably the best way of knowing. I followed some tutorials on YouTube. No more questions, but thank you for your mental health alone. Yes, we need to look after our mental health. Another big reason I switched to pen was I just found my perfectionism. The better I got at drawing, the worse my perfectionism was getting. The better I could do it, or I felt I could do it, the more it demanded that I had to. I just thought, blow this for a joke, and so I thought, the other big reason why I switched to pen was, well, I have to confront the fact that not every mark's going to be perfect. And it's been a really, really helpful thing to do. Sometimes we just got to bite the bullet and sort of take the bull by the horns. And is there another metaphor I can mix in there? Yeah. And of course, if you draw with pencil because you love drawing with pencil, and what's not to love about that, you can draw with pencil and not use an eraser. Like if you love drawing with pencil and the possibilities of graphite, but you do have trouble with perfectionism, then go off to draw somewhere and don't take an eraser. You can't use what you haven't taken. And that will help you, I think, overcome some of those issues if you have them. Okay, so we'll leave it there. Thanks for joining. If you're coming at the end, I hope you go back and see some of the things I said at the beginning. Confidence in our drawing, as well as being good for learning, just makes it more pleasurable as well. So all the best with that. Hope this has helped. I'll see you next time. Bye.